Okay, we got some breaking news from the NFL world today. So, former Indianapolis Colts head coach, former Eagles offensive coordinator Frank Reich has now been hired by the Carolina Panthers.
Somewhere along those lines.
I,
Happy
I like those glasses.
Halloween Eve!
I like those glasses, dude. They're
Tonight's
nice.
gonna be a thriller!
Have I told you I worked at the World Series? It was my first year at the stadium. I went to Fanatics Fest, I went to Comic Con, and I went to the World Series. It was my first year at the stadium, and the Yankees made it all the way to the World Series. Unfortunately, we lost 5 games to the Dodgers. I said the Giants will be a perfect fit for John Harbaugh because you already established the quarterback situation, you already established the running back position, you already established the what receiver position, and you have the top 5 pick in the draft.
Todd Bowles, at best, is a mediocre coach. He did the same situation with the Jets back in 2015, ultimately maliciously ruining a power-hungry Baker Mayfield and potentially Mike Evans.
But Indianapolis ultimately came back, got the go-ahead touchdown. Then, at the end of the game, when Brady got the ball less than a minute, Peyton had his head down the entire time because he knew Brady had enough time. But the interception happened. It's funny. All of a sudden, Peyton Manning hears the crowd roaring. He finally looks up and starts jumping up and down real.
Oh, uh, you there? Ladies and gentlemen, the co-host of Everything on the Table is apparently away at the moment. We apologize for the inconvenience. You there, buddy? Seems like your camera overlay is off. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, Nikki Steves will be here at the moment because currently he's experiencing technical difficulties. At this time, we're going to be very patient with him.
the Boston Celtics and San Antonio Spurs, which is the most interesting.
There we go. Finally. Sorry about that.
All right, no
I can hear
worries.
you good, right?
I was just providing
Yeah.
a score update while you were getting your situation worked out
Yeah.
on some of the NBA games going on currently.
Yep. It's a me, Mario. Happy Mario Day for those who are diehard Nintendo fans, and welcome to episode 5 of Everything on the Table. I'm your co-host, Agent Warrior X, and today is Tuesday, March 10th, 2026. This free agency has officially begun yesterday, and I want to say that this was by far one of the most craziest free agencies we've ever seen for the last couple years.
And they say that free agency starts tomorrow. I think someone got that information wrong because it feels like yesterday was day one. And today, yeah, we've had some news, but yesterday was as usual when everything started to jump. You had, well, for starters, the Philadelphia Eagles. Oh my, what happened? That was the worst start to free agency you could have had. Now I get Nakobe Jean, Jahan Dotson. All right, they were lower tier players. They weren't top priority re-signings. We can deal with that. But Reed Blankenship, who was one of the best pieces of the secondary, both defensive backs and safeties, from 2022 to present, of everyone that's either been there the entire time or passed through the Eagles in those years, goes to the Texans to an already strong defense. And we got Grego, what is up? What is up? And then the worst of all, Jalen Phillips, who was actually a key factor last year and a top priority to resign, goes to the Carolina Panthers, which at first that sounds a lot, but remember, Panthers were actually a good defense last year, and they led, I believe, in takeaways. So that's actually could be a really good pickup if he's utilized the same way he was utilizing with Vic Fangio.
I want to say that this free agency so far was not only crazy, but some teams were absolute winners. The number one winner has to be the Las Vegas Raiders. Not because they have the Kobe Dean, not because they have Fernando Mendoza. What?
Wait,
What? The Ravens just backed out of the Max Crosby trade.
really?
The Ravens just backed out of the Max Crosby trade.
Hold on. I'm about to look.
I just saw it on ESPN. I just saw it on my ESPN notification.
Yeah, I just looked it up right now on Google, and it's just coming in. They nixed the trade.
So, oh my God. So I'm guessing Max Crosby is coming back to the Ravens? I mean, to the Raiders?
Yeah, that's what it seems like, because
Oh my God. That's peak tamper right there. That's peak tampering.
that is.
Um,
It's speaking
I
of.
kid you not. The Ravens at this point is just the ultimate losers of this free agency because they lost Isaiah Likely to the Giants. They lost Tyler Linderbaum to the Raiders. Sorry.
Mhm.
They just lost Patrick Richter, by the way, who's making him as the highest paid fullback in the entire NFL. So 4 players. I forgot about Jordan Stout. For the Ravens. 4 John Harbaugh players are coming here to the Giants. And I want to say that this is a really, really good start of the offseason, despite losing Wan'Dale Robinson to the Texans, despite they lost Cordell Flott to the Titans, Wan'Dale Robinson to the Titans, and they lost Daniel Bellinger to the Titans. I feel like the Tennessee Titans are trying to become us at this point. But I think Isaiah Likely is a really good fit for the Giants. And speaking of the Giants, they just signed Jason Sanders for the Dolphins.
I mean, obviously, the Giants are busy and active during free agency, just like the Raiders, and because both those squads know they have to get better, and the only way to get better is to be busy and to make moves, left and as many moves as possible. So I give both teams credit for that. Now, time will ultimately tell if it pays off or not. We still got to get through rest of free agency and the draft, but at least I can respect what the Giants and Raiders are doing. They know they have to improve, and they're actually trying to make moves to make it happen. Unlike another team who the Raiders were involved with a trade, the Jets.
Nobody should be shocked about this whatsoever. How do you go from taking Geno Smith from the Seahawks, sending it back to the Giants? Really? The Jets, sorry. Really? Why would you send him back to the team that he was drafted? He's a fossil at this point.
And for the Jets, though, the main problem, why would you take Geno Smith? What's your future plan? If you're the Jets, are you planning on drafting a quarterback? Are you bringing in Geno to be a mentor? But I kind of get that. But at the same time, why Geno Smith, whose tenure ended on bad terms with the Jets during his first stint, why would you bring him in? Why not bring in a respected veteran who could actually be on good terms with the team? Maybe a guy like a Jameis Winston who's with the Giants. He doesn't have to move anywhere. He's already in the area.
Exactly.
That would be a good fit. But why
And
the
I
guy
know why
who,
they backed out. And I know why the Ravens backed out of the Max Crosby trade. We just got an update from Rudy Rossini. Max Crosby has failed his physical, so they cannot trade him. That's tough. And the crazy thing is that he had surgery too. He had surgery to be honest with you.
Yeah, but the whole timing of now you got to wonder the whole time. Of course, if he just had surgery, obviously a physical isn't going to go favorably fresh off surgery. Obviously, you could have either waited a month or two or until you actually tested him again. What? So at this, now I got to wonder what the Ravens were thinking in their handling of this.
What was the purpose of trading 2 first-round picks to the Raiders?
Really, and for the Raiders, well, we know what they're doing. They're trying to do any and everything to build for the future because they have to get all the picks you can get, sign all the players you can. But this whole Max Crosby thing this is the big one, but the biggest botch in free agency we've seen because the trade didn't even go through.
That's because of the pending physical. This is because of pending health situations. That's exactly why Max Crosby sometimes is injury prone in crucial moments. I think the Ravens big time fumbled this bag hardly. And not only Max Crosby failed his physical, but they lost 5 of the last 6 key players on that team. They lost Isaiah Likely to the Giants, who, by the way, did you know that before John Harbaugh was terminated, they signed in December, John Harbaugh signed a 3-year deal to Mark Andrews, and that ultimately he was terminated because the defense let him down. And because of that, they tricked the Ravens. They pulled them into a 5D chess and gave them checkmate and signed him to a 3-year deal to petting on his physical too.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the Raiders look like geniuses for this move right now. They completely fleeced the Ravens, and now they got all the leverage in the situation. And for the Ravens, it's all downhill at this point for them. You got Lamar Jackson left, but what about the draft? Oh, wait, that's right. The Raiders now have that. I mean,
I think the biggest winners at this point has to go to the Las Vegas Raiders. Despite having the number 1 pick, despite getting Clint Kubiak, despite having Brock Bowers, Ashley Genty, and of course Tyler Linderbaum, who by the way is the biggest key in the free agency in the free agency this year. And then ultimately you signed the Kobe Dean, you signed up other players. Now, about the rumors about Kenneth Walker the third heading to the Giants, nah, he didn't go to the Giants, he went to the Chiefs. Why? They were down to two teams that Kenneth Walker wanted to go to: the Chiefs and the Giants. The Chiefs ultimately took him because they desperately needed running back, which, by the way, Isaiah Pacheco went to the Lions now after David Monty was parted with, was traded to the Texans, which I think it makes sense, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, and that trade right there, and that signing Kenneth Walker to Kansas City, this is really, in the Patrick Mahomes era, the best running back move they pulled off on paper, if it works out to expectations. Because you go throughout the Mahomes era, they had, for his first season as the starter, Kareem Hunt for a majority of the season, his first stint, but then he got cut. And then you've had guys pass through like Williams, other guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire before his injury, but you've never really had like a true top-tier running back, even though you've had some good backs pass through that were good in the system. But now you're bringing in a Super Bowl MVP in Kenneth Walker. This could actually be a game changer, because now, fresh off Mahomes' injury, you're taking some of the pressure off him, just come back right away by giving him a top-notch running back to hand the ball to. And that can help him ease his way back to work next season.
I think ultimately, yes, the Eagles were the losers at the time in terms of losing the Kobe D, Blankenship, and Phillips to the Panthers, Texans, and Raiders. But you guys signed a shutdown corner from Seattle for a one-year deal.
Hey, and that's certainly a good thing. Now, the Nakobe Dean one I said I could live with, because really from 2022 to present, when you look at all the talent that was either there the entire time on defense or played for a portion of that time, from all the Darius Slays of the world, the Cooper DeJeans, Quinyon Mitchells, and then, the Zach Bonds and the so-ons, Nakobe Dean was not that strong a link in comparison to the rest of the players. So by default, he wasn't really a top priority re-signing. You could afford, hey, guys like that walk, you can kind of afford to take it. Even Javon Hargrave during that, before he went off to the 49ers, was another good piece for them. So it's like, all right, you can deal with that.
Speaking of the 49ers, they just got Mike Evans.
This is an interesting one, because Mike Evans, on one hand, I believe future Hall of Famer, but he is coming fresh off of injury-riddled season, going to the Niners, which, there's always that risk factor there with the Niners particularly. So it's going to be in not the most optimistic return situation. It's kind of 50-50. It all depends on staying healthy with the Niners. That's always going to be the big if. If it's not for that, Super Bowl contention for sure. But injuries are always a factor you got to wonder about, and you wonder what's going to end up happening. Now, Evans, it seems like at this point, he might be ring chasing, and the Bucs decide to move on, I guess, because they know they feel like they got his replacement in Emeka Ibuka after his awesome rookie campaign in 2025. And as far as the Eagles go, hey, you know what? I'll take it. We need help in the secondary, because last year you had cornerback, you had Quinyon Mitchell and Keely Ringo. Oh gosh, Adoree Jackson. Nah.
Now we understand why you understand why the Giants got rid of him. Shocking, absolutely shocking. He sometimes sucks at defense, especially in coverage lines.
Oh my gosh, don't even get me started on him. Anybody is an upgrade over him. But now you're taking a former Seahawks corner and a former Pro Bowler and bringing them into the fold in Philly. That's a significant upgrade. You're talking about Reek Woolen, a guy who has made a Pro Bowl, who actually knows what it's like to play on a top defense. So it's not a difficult transition. It's a one-year prove-it deal, because you still got to ultimately wait and see if he can actually fit in. But the odds of it, it was optimistic on the start. It looks like this is going to be, it's got to be better than what we had last year as a number 2 corner. So I'll take it. But we still got to figure out safety room.
So back to the signing with Patrick Ricard for the Ravens. He's a fullback, right? He signing him to the Giants for a 2-year deal has the highest paid fullback in the entire NFL. He's a great blocker. He's actually a really good blocker from what I'm hearing, because the Giants still. You remember how the Giants lacked the old offensive lineman, Nicky, a couple years ago? Remember how people talked about the Giants offensive lineman? About that. Yeah. They lacked a center. They lacked a depth blocker, right? And sometimes they lack a right guard and a right tackle, which is why they brought Jermaine Illuminor back for 3 more years, which, by the way, that was a really good signing for the Giants to reunite with him, because he's actually really good for us. He actually got some blocks, and then other times he sometimes mess up. But all that aside, he's a really good offensive tackle. And I think the Giants, in my opinion, are the second winners of this year's NFL free agency. The Titans is number 1. No, sorry, Raiders is number 1, Titans number 3, and the Giants are number 2.
And for sure, a lot of those teams certainly have made positive moves, and they are moving in the right direction. Now, there's some other teams that are kind of like the Steelers. They lost Kenneth Gainwell, but then got Rico Dowdle. That's kind of
and they got Michael Pittman Jr.
So it's like, all right, those are some decent pickups, but we still got a lot of questions. What are they going to do next year with quarterback? Because Aaron Rodgers, for all we know, he could end up retiring during late spring, early summer, because we've seen those players that wait until the summer to retire. So we still don't know for sure what's up with Aaron Rodgers, if he's actually going to try another season or if he does just finally retire later than usual in terms of the offseason timeline. Because it's happened before. Randall Cunningham, when he finally called a day, he waited till longer than usual. I think he signed a contract with the Eagles, and then either the day before a preseason home opener or at the game, he did an interview announcing his retirement so he could retire as an Eagle. Point being is, it's possible maybe Rodgers waits. One thing's for sure, if he signs a contract with the Packers when we all know what's coming next, he's going to have a press conference calling it a day. But that remains to be determined.
Oh, yeah, we just got an update regarding to Patrick Richard. So we signed a 2-year, $8.5 million as the highest fullback in the entire NFL.
Yep, and that's, hey, good for him. He's going to get paid with the Giants. So
look what the Ravens. If you see the highlights with Patrick Ricard, or I should say Patrick Ricard, he has been getting a lot of great blocking moments, especially when Derrick Henry was on that team too. That on paper with him, Lamar Jackson, and Derrick Henry, that was by far a good front 3.
And now you got yourselves a good fullback who can block. Now the next step for you guys, evaluate your offensive line either these upcoming days or as well as the draft, or both.
You forgot to address the shutdown corner. You forgot to address the cornerback situation too, because we lost Cordell Flott for the year. Ultimately, we got a shutdown corner for the Jaguars. They were also rumored that they were supposed to be trading Brian Thomas Jr., but the Jaguars closed the window automatically.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see, but I feel like once we get past free agency, that's when we're going to get a real idea of what each team's draft strategy is. Because by the end of March, we'll see, okay, we filled this void. Like right now for the Eagles, they're probably going to go more edge rusher or maybe a safety in the first round to try to fill those voids. But that also depends on what they do over this next week or two as well.
Personally, I would take Sonny Styles to make it as a inside linebacker in case Kayvon Thibodeau is a trade candidate because he's an outside linebacker. So is Abdul Carter. Well, Abdul Carter is an edge rusher. Keep that in mind. But Sonny Styles will be the perfect fit for the Giants, as far as I'm concerned. Oh yeah, and we're losing to the Pistons. Great. We should have never won those two games.
Yeah, I mean, this was really just a trap game for the Nets because the Pistons haven't. They had one of the worst. They had their worst week of the season last week. And I mean, granted, they were playing good teams, but ultimately losing those games, even though you're still the number one seed at the moment, Boston's creeping up behind you pretty close in the seedings. And secondly, along with Jaylen Brown having his best individual season, guess who's back? Jason Tatum. So they're not too far out of the picture. So point is, Pistons got a little pressure on them. It's a trap
I
for the
can't
Nets.
believe it. I can't believe it. The Knicks traded 5 first-round picks last year, when ultimately went back to the Eastern Conference Finals. So the first time since the new millennium. Now they regressed. Because recently Mikal Bridges has been playing terrible the past 3 games. Thank you, Knicks, by the way.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because and the Clippers who actually look like a halfway decent team now that they got rid of some of their older guys, which is kind of crazy. I mean, they're still a playing team, maybe 8 seed at best, but I still, yeah, for the Knicks, that's a game they should have won, but for some reason they didn't. Well, the Cavs, they're an interesting team. You got Mitchell and Harden, who've been playing really well since the trade deadline, but also 2 guys who, come playoff time, basically it's ironic. There are 2 guys you want during the regular season, but don't really want in the playoffs based off their track record to date. And don't even give me last year, the opening round. That Miami Heat team was the worst team to ever make the NBA playoffs. They had no business being in that series.
Yes, and even Mitch knows that Ravens backed out of the Crosby trade because of a failed physical. Again, he had some surgery. Did he not? Did he not have surgery a couple months ago, sorry?
And that's the craziest part about it is like this news was out there. The Ravens had time to take this into consideration before they made the move, and they still went for it anyway. So
now their first round pick is pretty much getting owned by the Raiders. So the Ravens pretty much scammed themselves out of that, unless they got that pick back.
yeah, but this is an interesting free agency. And we'll say this though, as far as the Eagles go, it's at least the sky is still greener than it is for the 76ers. And I'll say this about them. They ultimately screwed up at the trade deadline by just sitting there hoping that Embiid and Maxey would stay healthy. Because obviously that's not the case. Maxey's going to be out for a few weeks after that injury against the Hawks. They fall into the 8 seed as of right now. And then you still got the Atlanta Hawks and Miami Heat, who've actually gotten hot since the trade deadline, started winning more games. They moved up in the seedings in the Eastern Conference. The Sixers they could have done what the Lakers did in 2023 when they had Russ, AD, LeBron. They realized Carmelo, they realized they had too many older guys. They had to get some young players too. And they did a bunch of lower level trades where they got guys like Hachimura, Austin Reeves and the company. And they turned their season around, made to the play-in, won in the play-in, beat the Grizzlies in the opening round, beat the Warriors in the second. They fell short in the conference finals, but that was at least a valiant effort to go all in. The Sixers should have done something similar, at least make the effort. Go and get a Yabusele. They could have gotten a Vucevic or an AD, one or the other, not both, but gotten guys that could have at least helped them a little bit. Try to use Ricky Council or try to get a guy like maybe an Alex Caruso in the Jared McCain trade, something. But instead, they didn't do any of that, and now it's coming back to bite them. No Embiid, no Maxey, and they're in a struggle against the Grizzlies.
You know what else? We might struggle against you guys next week because next week is St. Patrick's Day.
And they could have gotten Yabusele too, because granted, he hasn't played that good with the Knicks, but he played better with the Sixers. That would have been a trade the Knicks probably would have been willing to agree to, and Yabu would have been happy to return to Philly, where he played better and fit in better. At least they would have had depth pieces with some of those guys. But they didn't do it. And let's be honest, Daryl Morey is really not that good of a general manager. Even going back to his days with the Rockets, he ultimately made a lot of moves. He didn't put the team in the best position to actually get over the hump against teams like the Warriors either. So really, he's just coasted off having the right talent around him his entire career as an executive.
So this is the next thing I want to talk about. And a lot of people's been saying that the World Baseball Classic is the most entertaining so far. Team USA has beaten Mexico, right? They play Italy in the next couple of hours or probably tomorrow. And I think Japan is going to come down between two teams who's going to win the World Baseball Classic. Japan and the United States, led by Captain America himself, Aaron Judge. Meanwhile, you have Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper doing their part as well. But I will say this: Team USA needs to work on less giving away less runs, because giving more runs will create huge problems. And I think, in my opinion, the pitchers need to step up. Yes, David Bednar may have not been called up yet in a couple of minutes, but a couple of games, but I think they need to step up.
Hey, you've been following it, so I'll let you take the reins on that one. But as far as the NBA goes, I got to say this, though. My prediction, assuming that no major injuries happen, for the Western Conference Finals is going to be Spurs versus Thunder, and the winner of that series plays the Celtics in the NBA Finals and wins the finals against Boston. That's my prediction as now the way momentum's going, because Boston's heating up, moving up the seedings at the right time. Now they got their former finals MVP back. You got Peyton Pritchard stepped up his game this year. You still got Derek White, Nikola Vucevic, who's still a solid role player when he's surrounded with the right pieces. This is how you properly build a team up with depth. And you look over in the Western Conference, OKC Thunder, bringing back their main guys. And then, of course, when they got Alex Caruso, when they shipped off Josh Giddey, great deal. Nice role player that helps out. Even Isaiah Joe, who the Sixers didn't want to use. Okay, Isaiah Joe isn't going to be the best player in the world, but he can still get you some threes off the bench and at least give your offense something when utilized. And then you look at the Spurs, a lot of talent there. It's not just Wemby. You also got De'Aaron Fox, Devin Vessel, Dylan Harper, the son of Ron Harper Sr. from the Chicago Bulls teams in the 90s. You also got Julian Champagne. You got guys there.
And you know what the crazy thing is? Why couldn't the Nets do that? Instead of just spending 5 first rounders, aside from Diego Dero, because, by the way, Diego Dero is out for the rest of the season, why couldn't they use their picks on just solid talent instead of just randomly just selecting just one player you don't know after another? You gotta. This is the prime example of scouting reports have a bad track record of bad drafting. This is how you set a franchise back for 3.5 years or more.
Oh, you're having audio difficulties. Give it 1 second, folks.
Someone's trying to call me. I'm gonna just do this real quick. So yeah, like I was saying before, why couldn't the Nets do that? Why couldn't the Nets do that when they had 5 first round picks? Why couldn't they do that?
And the bad part is they did this twice, basically. They did something similar twice, go all in for a bunch of veterans. And once that ran flat, it came back to bite them in the long term. The first time they tried it, going to get Pierce, KG. Paul Pierce, they got him a decade too late. If they would have done a trade with the Celtics, thrown Richard Jefferson, maybe Jason Collins and a pick in back in like 03 to help them get over the hump, maybe it would have been a different story to team up with Jason Kidd then. But they waited a decade too late, got Kevin Garnett a decade too late, and Jason Terry a decade too late. It came back to bite them, and they didn't return to relevance until they were forced to go all in for KD, Kyrie, Harden. And that didn't work out. Now they're back at the bottom again. It's obvious the Nets got to realize that formula of going in for veterans doesn't work. They got to try something different.
Worst case scenario, back-to-back years, they might sabotage a tank. And that's the worst part about it. Some teams, when you're trying to tank for the best player, yes, tanking could be illegal at most of the time, but at the same time, you need a franchise star player. What coach in the right mind would try to go to a Brooklyn Clown show? The same team that even try to win games to have cultural wins to try to sabotage a tank. Yes, beating the Pistons the first game was a huge comeback by 23 points, but that's literally going to destroy your tank, and now you're bottom four again for the first time since last year. You won too many games because of that, and because of that, the Sixers got the third overall pick because they were losing games fairly, and they have most of the key players hurt. And guess what? This year, Tyrese Maxey's hurt again. Joel Embiid is out again. I swear, if they give the Sixers the number 1 or number 2 pick, I would cry badly. Really.
That's something that at this point, Sixers would love to have happen, but we got to wait and see. Either way, they're in turmoil, period. And as far as the whole tanking thing goes, I mean, sometimes you don't really have a choice. Sometimes you have to get better in the future. The OKC Thunder got to that point shortly before COVID, but they accepted the fact that that was their only option, and it paid off in the long term. The Spurs got to that point pre-Wemby, where they accepted that they had a nice run consecutively making the playoffs. It all came to an end the COVID season, and they had to start over from scratch. It's going to happen eventually, but the quicker you realize that, yeah, you're going to have to go through a rebuild to get better in the future, like them, the Rockets, the Spurs, the better off you are in the long term. Trying to throw all your eggs in one basket just for one season usually doesn't work.
And you're right. You're absolutely right about everything you said. Sometimes you have no choice but to tank. Did I also mention statistically the Nets are god awful in every category? They're 30th in every category.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you could kind of tell. You could just tell by the way they played, but actually hearing it mapped out hits a lot differently. Now it's like that the Nets truly are now that awful franchise. I mean, the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference may be stronger, but this isn't as weak as it was. And I mean, you don't even if they say they had Jason Kidd in his prime now, it wouldn't work as well as it did in the early 2000s because the Eastern Conference is stronger as a whole now than it was then. But at least you would have a star player that could at least bring fans to the arena and make them watchable. They don't have that at the moment.
But hey, at least you won like a few games, so that would make sure you don't actually try to sabotage a tank. Sure, that comeback against the Pistons was a grinded out culture win, but that was literally young dudes that you're starting. Yes, you have Michael Porter Jr., Noah Clowney, Zion Williams, and I think this is the exact similar situation as the Miami Dolphins back in 2019. Remember that double overtime game? Remember that overtime game in the Super Tank Bowl that happened
With
against
the Bengals?
Yup. One of the worst teams in the AFC North ultimately destroyed the tank at the last moment and drafted Tua.
Oh my gosh. I mean, and the crazy part is that was almost a tie, which would have been the funniest thing.
But the real question is, if that ended up in a tie, who would get the number one pick? Is it just both teams being getting the number one pick, or is it just going to be simply the Dolphins or the Bengals?
You would have had to do a coin flip in that case because I think that's what they did when the Panthers and Jaguars were both joining as expansion teams in 95. They did a coin flip from 1 and 2 because that's something the NBA screwed up, like I said before, with expansion teams. Never have an expansion team be the number one pick, which in general you should do. Or if you're going to have multiple expansion teams, do a coin flip for number 1 and 2 because you got to give the expansion team that has just a bunch of free agents filled with other teams' rejects, somebody to at least draw fans to the arena, somebody to help them a few years down the line.
And to top it all off, I'm going to say that this overall, in my opinion, was by far one of the worst case scenarios for the Nets so far this year. And top of the worst case scenario for the Dolphins over time. Ever since they got the number 2 pick, they only made the playoffs twice and then lost both of them in situations. They lost against the Chiefs in a blizzard game, which, by the way, Tua's weakness is pretty much the cold weather. And they lost to wait, was it the Bengals? No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
The
Who did they
Bills.
play in the? Oh, thank you, the Bills. Yeah, they lost to the Bills in 2022, and they lost to the Chiefs. They lost to two powerhouse AFC teams, and then since then, Miami has been nothing more than a huge disappointment. Speaking of disappointments, I think the most disappointing team of this year in terms of the NBA, the Pelicans, that trade with Atlanta was by far the worst one they've ever done. The Kings, the Pacers, and the Nets. The Nets, by the way, are one of the worst teams in basketball statistically, and they lost 10 straight. The Kings lost how many games in a row
Bro, and
this
you
year?
would think the Kings would at least be in playing contention. You would have thought, but to be completely at the bottom of the league, let alone the West, I'm trying to come on. Even 2K simulates them to be a playoff team, which, granted, that's a video game, but still, you would think they'd at least have enough talent to at least have a shot at the playoffs. And no, they're just at the bottom of the league. That's why I consider them the most disappointment because out of those teams you named, they actually went into the season with more expectations.
The crazy thing about it is that Brooklyn is ranked 30th in every category. The Kings are dead last. We know that, let alone the bottom team of the West. And to top it all off, Pacers just went back to the finals. Despite Tyrese Halliburton's torn Achilles or torn ACL, despite that, they were still winning in spite of Halliburton.
Like you would think the Pacers would, okay, I know Halliburton not being there's a difference maker, but you would think they'd at least maybe be somewhere between 10th and 7th seed, at least be in the mix for the play-in, if not the playoffs. But to go from the finals to bottom of the league, this is one of those rare NBA post-finals fall-offs because we talk about the Super Bowl losers curse in the NFL, where a lot of times the team that loses the Super Bowl gets cursed the next year. It doesn't happen as often in the NBA. This is one of those rare times something like that happens. Like the only other times I can think of were the Warriors following the KD era where they got plagued with injuries. The Lakers that first year after Shaq was traded when Kobe was learning how to lead as the number one guy. But it's only a handful of examples I can think of outside of this. So point is, it rarely happens in the NBA after a finals loss.
Now, if you want to talk about this, is the next topic I want to talk about. Since today is Mario Day, if I had to choose the best Mario game of all time, I'm gonna give you my Mount Rushmore of best Mario games of all time. The first one is obviously Super Mario Brothers, not the new one, but specifically the one from '85. Yes, it's one of the greatest Mario games, and Nintendo was carrying. Have you seen Nintendo recently after the '90s? They were still one of the huge consoles in gaming, despite Mario as their best character. So Super Mario Brothers is my number one Mount Rushmore. The second Mount Rushmore has to be Super Mario World. Super Mario World introduced Yoshi. We know that. Super Mario World was one of the best SNES games of all time, if not one of the greatest. And then the third Mount Rushmore game, I'm going to say is the third best Mount Rushmore has to be Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 was by far the greatest ones, despite the predecessor of Super Mario World. But ultimately, Super Mario 64 introduced 3D in '96. And the final one is Super Mario Sunshine. Yes, this year celebrates 25 years of the GameCube, but ultimately, Super Mario Sunshine was by far the best 3D game they've ever made it after the new millennium hit. So that's my four Mount Rushmore Mario games. What's your Mount Rushmore Mario games?
This one, I wouldn't be able to put together a list. I'd have to copy and paste someone else's list. So
It's okay if you don't know it. You can just tell me which game you like the most. Speaking of that, if I had to choose the best Mario sports game, it would have to be Mario Sports Mix and Mario Hoops 303. If you grew up playing the DS, right? If you grew up playing the Nintendo DS or Wii, I'm going to put it this way and say that Mario Hoops 3 on 3 was the best basketball game on the DS. Not only it's one of the best Mario games similar to Mario Superstar Baseball or Mario Strikers Super Strikers, or better yet, Mario Golf or tennis, Mario Hoops 3 on 3 was by far the most underrated game. And it had Final Fantasy characters because Square Enix did collaborate with Nintendo at one point, twice. Three times. They collaborated once in the DS version. They collaborated with the Wii version, which is Mario Sports Mix, having basketball, hockey, volleyball, and dodgeball. Keep in mind, that's four sports in total. But Mario Hoops 3 on 3 was by far the best Mario basketball game of all time. And I grew up playing that game the most.
in the Wii, there were some fun memories right there. I mean, I remember 3-on-3 basketball, but there was a few other games. Like I remember some of the presets in the Nintendo Wii as well, such as tennis and boxing. Those were kind of fun for something different. But the Wii, I was kind of like for about a year or so into it. Then I kind of started to wean off it a little bit after a year and lose interest.
And yep, enter Super Mario Galaxy, SMG. And I kid you not, Super Mario Galaxy was by far the best game that Nintendo Wii made when the Wii came out with Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort back in 2008, 2009. Ultimately, when Super Mario Galaxy came out, best platformer action game. Yes, it introduced Rosalina, but the Super Mario Galaxy 2 became better. And now you're making a sequel of Super Mario Bros. Movie now into Super Mario Galaxy movie of this year. And it comes out on April Fool's Day. So I do want to say that over the past 40 years, Nintendo has come a long way from the two best characters in Nintendo. If it wasn't for Mario and Luigi, Sonic would have dominated the 90s. If it wasn't for Mario and Luigi, other characters such as Crash Bandicoot and Master Chief would have dominated.
But we made it this far into the show, and one thing interesting, we haven't mentioned college basketball yet because it's March, and well, so that means college basketball is off the hoops, but we're just a little bit away from it. It officially starts March 15th, so by next week, we'll be a couple days, on St. Patrick's Day, we will be a couple weeks into the tournament, and it's already starting. So why not? Let's take a look at the rankings.
We already know Arizona's number one. We already know Duke is number two. We already know North Carolina is going to be a top five team. By the way, Caleb Wilson is out for the rest of the season because of that thumb injury they had. But to be honest with you, let's do the rankings while I talk about this. The moral of this story, of this show, the Ravens really messed up badly. I kid you not. They messed up badly because they didn't know one thing. When you trade a player, there's always one thing that you got to be very extra careful about, depending on which player you sign, right? Because sometimes that player could potentially become injury prone, or worst case scenario, medical physical failure.
Oh yeah, and trying to think of some other examples. This happened with Joe Flacco, I remember, when he went to the Broncos. Well, actually, to be honest, the Broncos, they screwed the pooch constantly, time and time again. You got AP. This is from ESPN. But we've seen how teams have
You mean
lost out
Antonio
on
Pierce,
players due
right?
to failed physical.
You talk about Antonio Pierce, right? He failed a physical at one point, did he not?
Yeah, I mean, there's really there's a history of this too. I mean, but to go for a guy in Max Crosby who was expected to be one of your top guys and act to fail this miserable to not even keep him, that's ridiculous. You got
And worst case
I mean,
scenario, that picks could potentially be kept.
and it's crazy now with the Ravens. We talked about, we gave Harbaugh some flack as you see Duke, Arizona, Michigan, Florida. It's crazy. We talked about that. Harbaugh had overstayed his welcome. I think we realized he's not the only problem now, was he? You could also blame the front
Worst case
office.
scenario
Now,
that he kept. Worst case scenario that they kept Zach Orr and Daniel Fahalele for way too damn long. And I'm hearing that Daniel Fahalele might end up on the Giants. May God have mercy on my soul if this happens.
yeah, and it's also insane because you had and UConn, holy smokes. I guess they're honoring Gigi's legacy well, because we've heard before Kobe had said that Gigi was hell-bent on going to UConn when Reggie was trying to make, there's the funny video, Reggie was trying to go UCLA, and we know, so I guess they're still keeping that going strong. And it's crazy because UConn, March Madness this decade, both the men's and the women's have provided plenty of highlights for their basketball athletic program as a whole. The women winning last year, keeping strong this year. Coach Hurley winning a couple chips before that for the men's. I mean, it's been phenomenal for UConn. I mean, lucky for them, they have both, for college program, they have both the men's and the women's.
You know, whatever you think of college basketball and for men's and women's, right? You think mostly Duke. You think mostly North Carolina. You think of Michigan State, Arizona, right? Houston, Florida, etc. But the one college everybody's been talking about is none other than UConn. UConn is one of them. Ohio State is another one too. Keep in mind that Ohio State is both great for men's basketball and college football. They're a juggernaut in college football regardless, but sometimes they're good at college basketball.
Right, in Ohio, and it's interesting too because a lot of these, and you think about like sleeper teams for talent, not necessarily the best teams historically for college basketball, but as far as like NBA talent goes, the sleeper is Marquette, because you'll occasionally get the Dwayne Wades or the Jimmy Butlers that come out of Marquette and go on to have successful NBA careers.
I couldn't agree more with you on that one. Can you imagine next month, April, when we do this show more often, if I'm not busy with work? Can you imagine if I'm on vacation doing this show with you? That would be cool.
Absolutely. So we got a lot to look forward to between March Madness, NFL free agency. There's still some more big moves that could happen. And you got the NBA starting to heat up now. We're starting to get an idea of who's likely going to carry the momentum into the playoffs, whose playoff luck is in question, such as the Detroit Pistons after last week. I mean, sure, if they're number 1 or 2 seed, they got a favorable opening round matchup, but after that, what comes next? Similar to the Cavs in recent years, where they start off on a good note, but after that, it becomes trouble. But we will have to wait and see.
And you know what? To be honest with you guys, this is by far, so far, if not the craziest offseason we've seen so far in terms of the NFL. Free agency started on Monday when it hits when come 12 p.m. yesterday, a floodgates Black Friday similar type has arrived. Everyone went crazy. Kenneth Walker to the Chiefs, Michael Pittman to the Steelers, Isaiah Likely to the Giants, Blankenship to the Texans, Jacoby Dean to the Raiders, Phillips to the Panthers, and of course Alec Pierce to the Colts. Which, by the way, that was by far one of the questionable signings that the Colts have ever done. Why would you sign? Why would you sign Alec Pierce a long-term deal instead of focusing on the one specific position that you struggled the most ever since Andrew Luck retired, a quarterback? And you signed Daniel Jones to have a 50 you transition tagged Daniel Jones to a $50 million deal for 1 year. So that's basically a make or break year if you tore his ACL again.
I mean, for the Colts, I get it. Injuries played a role in the downfall, but it wasn't just injuries. They were already starting to lose games before the Daniel Jones injury. So there's more you got to factor in, though. And come quarterback wise, they don't have a long-term answer at this moment.
Which, by the way, thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. I know Nikki was kind of late because of the technical difficulties. Please forgive him for that. Until next time, goodbye, my friends, and I'll see you all on St. Patrick's Day. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, so have a great weekend if you're going to go out for the weekend before St. Patrick's Day and to watch March Madness, or to just have fun. Do so safely. If you're going to drink, have a designated sober driver, a Lyft or a taxi, take you home. So with that being said, guys, have a great rest of your night with Nicky Stees and my co-host Agent Warrior X. And until next week, peace.